Mr. Fred Weir, Russian expert as well as journalist. Mr. Weir, thank you for speaking to Times Now about this. What's your take on the current situation where there is an allegation being leveled by the Russian side that this was a direct attempt on the part of the Ukrainians to reach the heart of Moscow? There are some reports that also say that this might have been a possible assassination attempt. What's your take on the situation, sir?
Well, I'm sure it's not a false flag. I don't know why the Russians would voluntarily give themselves a black eye, because that's what that looks like. An explosive device penetrating into the walls of the Kremlin. And not only that, but that film shows it hitting the presidential office. The dome there is right above Putin's personal office. So the Russians wouldn't do that to themselves. And the Ukrainians obviously are seeking to, I mean, it doesn't have much military significance, but psychologically, I think the goal is to rattle Putin, maybe scare Russians, maybe make them see the war coming home. After all, Ukrainians see that every day. And so it's, in a sense that the Ukrainians are giving payback. I don't know what escalations Russians could do. The only thing I can think of is if they could personally target Zelensky. That would be really, really unwise. But I don't see why they would. But otherwise, they are firing everything they've got at Ukraine already. And the Ukrainians are firing back. It's not very much, really. It looks impressive, but Ukrainians are launching, veritable pinpricks in response. So,
okay, Mr. Weir, we'll just come back to you. Please do stay with us because Volodymyr Zelensky has been in Helsinki, in Finland, trying to mobilize support towards the Ukrainian cause and seeking the support of many countries sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause in this matter. Let's, in fact, listen into what he said some time back.
Разів сказав, і без будь-яких секретів можу повторити, нам потрібні. Дуже потрібні. Чи будуть вони у нас і чому я вірю, що будуть, я впевнений. Але так відбувається ця війна, що ми повинні постійно довести це на полі бою. Спочатку ми йдемо вперед, показуємо, що за 3 дні нас не можна захопити, потім нам дають якусь зброю. А після цього ми знов йдемо вперед, просимо далекобійну артилерію. Відбувається по-різному. У нас знов є складний успіх, але тим не менш після цього нам дають відповідну зброю. І тому чому я впевнений, що у нас будуть літаки? Тому що скоро у нас будуть наступальні дії. І після них, я впевнений, нам дадуть літаки.
So that was Volodymyr Zelensky. In fact, there's more breaking news coming in where Zelensky's press secretary has in fact commented now on the Russian claim about a drone attack on the Kremlin. And just to quote him, he says, "We have no information about the so-called night attacks on the Kremlin, but as President Zelensky has repeatedly stated, Ukraine directs all available forces and means to liberate its territories and not to attack others." So let me take this back to Mr. Fred Weir, Russian expert and journalist. Mr. Weir, so that was along predictable lines on the part of the Ukrainians, where there appears to be deniability on their part about having had any role in this particular drone attack on the Kremlin.
Yeah, and they do that routinely. When the Crimea Bridge explosion happened, they denied any knowledge of it and so on. It's just sort of obvious that it had to be them. But I suppose they do that because their Western sponsors are very leery about attacking Russian territory. And in fact, most of them, the Americans in particular, have made no secret of it. Not only that, they deny certain types of weapons to Ukraine so as not to tempt them to attack Russian territory. So I guess that's facing west and saying we don't know what happened here. But I can't imagine any other scenario other than a Ukrainian attack, and a very effective one because it hit the presidential palace in the heart of the Kremlin. So, I'm sure that's all there is to it.
Mr. Weir, you did say earlier, and you made a very important remark, saying that it would be unwise on the part of the Russians to directly attack the Ukrainian presidential palace, or for that matter, Volodymyr Zelensky. Do you believe that that kind of an escalation is realistic, or would the Russians actually keep off? How do you read that situation?
That I don't know. I really don't know. I think it would be extremely unwise. And by the way, I think this was unwise too. I think it will not have the effect of striking fear into the heart of Putin or any Russians. I think if anything, it'll have the opposite effect. And any attempt to kill Zelensky would only have the effect of attracting much more sympathy toward him and his cause. So I think that it's just really unwise to go after leaders. I think Russian media are already saying that it smacks of desperation on the Ukrainian part, but they're simply giving payback for what they perceive the Russians are doing to them. But I don't see how this changes anything.